Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the New Possibilities Hour, part of the Will Work for Food project, founded by Natalie Armstrong Motan. Today is January 1st, 2024, and we are very excited to get the year started with a presentation by Professor Leonard Riskin. We're starting the 5th year of the New Possibilities Hour, the Will Work for Food project. It's unbelievable. As you know, we do this to raise funds to fight food insecurity worldwide. As long as food insecurity continues, so will we. And as you know, there's no charge for these great webinars. We ask people to contribute to a food bank if they like what they see. And our audiences have been so generous in contributing in honor of our great speakers. Jean Lawler, my esteemed co-host, would you please announce the running total of just how much our audiences have contributed since the series began?
Absolutely. This is just really wonderful. You know, we ended the year just over the $500,000 mark, the last presentation, and we're starting the new year at $504,727.65. And that is, those are millions of meals that have been served, thanks to the generosity of the speakers, this group, and thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jean, for all you've done to contribute to the project's success. Today, we start out with a fabulous speaker, Professor Leonard Riskin. Leonard Riskin is visiting professor at the Northwestern University Pritzker School of Law. He's previously taught at the University of Florida, the University of Missouri. He really doesn't need much of an introduction to this crowd. He's the inventor of the famous Riskin's Grid, which has molded and shaped debate and conversation in the field of dispute resolution for decades. Len has written a new book. It's called Managing Conflict Mindfully. Don't believe everything you think. I've read it. I think it's an excellent book. And we invited Len on to talk about some of the ideas in the book, things that you'll be able to put to work in your negotiations, your communications, your mediations instantly. So without further ado, Professor Riskin, we're happy to welcome you, yourself, and all of your parts here to the New Possibilities Hour. Please tell us a little bit about the food bank to which you would like people to contribute if they're in a position to do so. And then on with the presentation. Professor Riskin, the floor is yours.
Good morning. My food bank, my local food bank, is the Greater Chicago Area Food Depository, which supports the entire Greater Chicago area, which is, as I'm sure you imagine, needs food. Every day when I walk to the office, I pass lots of people who are hungry and often begging. And it's very sad as I walk through this very nice neighborhood near Northwestern Law School. So I hope you'll join in. It's a terrific program. It has, just in case this matters, a wonderful website, and it's very easy to use, and it allows you to dedicate any of your donations to anything you wish or to any person you wish. So, should we move right in?
Go for it.
So I want to thank Jeff and Natalie Armstrong Moten and Jean Lawler for running this fabulous program and for inviting me to speak, and to thank all of you for showing up. We're ready to go. So here's the deal on this book. The book is all about one particular problem that I've noticed for at least 20 years. And I want to present it, explain it, and suggest ways to deal with this problem. The problem is that many of us, maybe most of us, maybe all of us who are trained and experienced in negotiation, sometimes when we're negotiating, really screw things up, do a bad job. And after the negotiation ends, we realize that we should have done it differently, or we should have done something differently. And if we had, the process and the outcome probably would have been better. So I want to explain that, why it happens, how it happens, and how we might learn to overcome the causes of that kind of situation when an experienced, educated negotiator goofs things up. I want to start with a story which some of you may be able, probably a lot of you can relate to this story. It's not in a professional context, but it's something that happened in 1992 when I was a young, self-confident man who thought I knew an awful lot about negotiation, how to negotiate, and also that I knew how to take care of myself in different cultures and different countries. So here's what happened. I'm on a vacation with my wife and our 12-year-old son in Egypt. It was a luxurious vacation. We stayed in the best hotels, and we had a private Mercedes-Benz, and a driver took us around Cairo. It was inexpensive at the time for people with US dollars. So on the last part of the trip, we went to Luxor. Luxor, Egypt is south of Cairo, about, I'm making this up, 50 miles or 100 miles or something like that. It's the home of many of the most important pyramids in Egypt. And on our last night in Luxor, we decide we need to have pizza. So we decide to go to a place called La Mama at the Sheraton Hotel. It was reputed to have the best pizza in Luxor. And as I'll explain to you, we did have that dinner, and none of us remember anything about the food for reasons I will explain. When we start, there's a 1-mile walk. We were staying at the Hyatt, and the Sheraton is 1 mile along the Nile River on a broad boulevard called the Corniche. Our son campaigns to take a carriage. We see hundreds of horse-drawn carriages going up and down the Corniche looking for customers. Finally, Casey, my wife, and I give in to Andrew's pleading and say, okay, we'll take a carriage. And I get into a conversation with one of the carriage drivers. He wants us to pay 10 Egyptian pounds for each of us, so 30 Egyptian pounds. And for some reason I can't remember, I decide we only should pay 10 Egyptian pounds. Now, 10 pounds were roughly equivalent to $3 at the time. So that was not, it was not much. It was really an insignificant amount of money to us at the time. So I think he agrees that he'll take all three of us for 10 pounds. We jump in. As the carriage starts rolling, the driver, I call him Mr. Hassan, compliments me on my family. And he says, I have 6 children and a wife, and I have to work very hard to support them. And by the way, the fee is 30 pounds. I say, no, it's not. We go back and forth. I'm angry. I say, stop the carriage. We're getting out, with all the force and ferocity that I could muster. And he completely ignores me and keeps going. Andrew and Tricia are sitting in the back, totally humiliated by my behavior, as they always have been. Whenever I tend to negotiate in public, when I'm with them, they're just cringing. We get to the entrance to the Sheraton Hotel. We disembark. I tell Mr. Hassan, I'm going to give you a 10-pound note. He says, no, it's 30 pounds. I say, no, it's 10. I open my wallet, look in my wallet, and see I don't have a 10-pound note. All I have is a 20-pound note. So I ask if he will give me change. He says, yes. I give him the 20-pound note. He shuffles it around quickly, and he says, you didn't give me a 20-pound note. You gave me a 50 piastre note, which looks like a 20-pound note, but it's worth pennies. My wife, Casey, is saying, just give him the money. He needs it a lot more than we do. I gave him the 20 pounds, the other 20-pound note. So now I've paid him 40 Egyptian pounds when he was only asking for 30. So this is the equivalent of, I've paid equivalent of $16. He thanks me. I feel crushed. I'm defeated. And then he asks me for bakshish. Bakshish is a tip. He's asking me for a tip after all of that. So what do you think I did? I gave him a tip. Why did I give him a tip? Because I was frightened. At that point, I was frightened of him. I was frightened of the situation. I was a stranger in a strange land. So that was over, and we slouched into the restaurant, sat down, and I ruined our dinner by talking about Mr. Hassan's character defects and how he cheated me. And after dinner, I announce we're going to walk around on the Corniche until we find Mr. Hassan. Casey says, I don't understand men. A woman would never do this. Why are you doing this? I don't remember what my response was, except I said, wait, we're going to find Mr. Hassan. I'm going to put our relationship back in balance, which is something I read in one of our articles about mediation. And we started walking and walking. And finally, we see Mr. Hassan in his carriage coming down the opposite side of the Corniche. He's got a buddy sitting with him. I think maybe he's frightened of me. That's why he brought along a friend. And then I'm standing there. His carriage is paused. We're looking at each other, looking really tough, both of us. You know, like, I don't remember, maybe like President Trump a little bit. I was before his recent photo. And then I'm in a position of the proverbial dog, the dog who's chasing a car down the street and barking. When the dog catches the car, what can the dog do? So the dog has no good options, and I don't have any good options. And we have a stare down for a few minutes or seconds, seemed like hours. Then I turn around, slouch, and we all walk back to our Hyatt hotel. Oh, so that's sort of the end of the negotiation. But as you can see, we didn't do very well, Casey, Andrew, and I was humiliated. I wound up paying too much. I didn't teach Andrew anything that I wanted to. I didn't show Casey that I was a good negotiator and that it was worthwhile for me to negotiate. I think they both had lesser opinions of me than they had before. Mr. Hassan came out pretty well in terms of money. He probably enjoyed the evening, but my family didn't enjoy the evening. So what should I have done? And what was I capable of doing at that time instead? I should have used some combination of position-based and interest-based negotiation. Probably all of you know this distinction between positions and interests, which was already widely known at that time, introduced by in the Getting to Yes book by Doug Stone and Bruce Patton and Sheila Heen. I'm sorry, I got the authors by Roger Fisher, Bruce Patton, and Bill Urey. That I could have used. I knew positions and interests. I didn't. I forgot all about the interests. Had this occurred later, I might have also relied on two other important books that also were written by people associated with the program on negotiation at Harvard Law School, Beyond Reason, which dealt with emotions and difficult conversations by Doug Stone and Bruce Patton and Sheila Heen. Those weren't published, but I really didn't pay attention to underlying interests. So an interest, a position, just to refresh everyone's recollection here, is what you say you want in a negotiation, or so what you say you want. I want X. I want you to pay me $100,000 because you caused that amount of damages or something like that. I want to pay this much. And an interest is the reason you're making that offer or demand, what you're trying to achieve. So, in the best example I like to give is from a cartoon, which I think was in the New Yorker, and it shows a picture. It's a drawing of a king and the queen, and between the king and the queen is sitting the king's counselor in the role of a mediator, I think. And the king says, "Off with her head." And the counselor mediator says to the king, "I hear you saying off with her head, but I'm hearing you thinking you need more, I want more attention." So the king really needs more attention from his wife. He asserts a position of killing her, cutting her head off, but he won't get what he needs. He won't get his interest satisfied if his interest is more attention from his wife. If you look at the actual cartoon, it's much funnier than the way I just explained it. So why didn't I pay attention to interest, given that I've already by this time been writing articles about mediation and negotiation, emphasizing interest, teaching the value of interests and how often they can be more helpful than positions, and also they can easily be connected with positions. Why did I screw it up? So I go through some detail in the book about why, but to make this simple, I'm suggesting in the book and elsewhere that there are 5 obstacles that people like us face, obstacles to negotiating skillfully and wisely. So I just to say what I think they are. So there are 5. Sometimes we're thinking too fast. We're thinking automatically. We're behaving automatically. We're feeling emotions automatically. That's one. Automatic thinking, fast thinking. Sometimes we're excessively self-centered. We are inadequate at managing our emotions. Our social skills are not good enough, or we don't manage our focus and awareness. So I go through each of these in the book and talk about how I succumbed to all of these obstacles or impediments. I was thinking too fast. I was excessively self-centered. I didn't manage my emotions. I didn't know how to interact skillfully with Mr. Hassan. And I had trouble paying attention because as I'm interacting with Mr. Hassan, I'm thinking about all kinds of things that are in some way related to or affected by what's going on. So In the book, I propose two methods of transcending these kinds of obstacles and thereby being able to work to negotiate more skillfully, more wisely, more of the time. And the two methods, one is mindfulness, the other is internal family systems. I'll just say a word about mindfulness and then focus on internal family systems, because I think that's will be new to many of the people on this webinar. And if you're interested in mindfulness, you probably have some sense of it. But just to say a word about the mindfulness first, mindfulness is a particular, the way I use the term, it's a particular way of paying attention to whatever is going on in the present moment. So you're paying attention deliberately, moment to moment, without judgment or evaluation. So the idea is to be, you learn to do this in meditation, and if to the extent you can do it, you're going to feel better and be able to perform better. And in the book, I explain why this can help a person overcome these 5 obstacles and thereby perform better in and more skillfully and wisely in a negotiation. Okay, now I'd like to say a few words about internal family systems and ask you before I start to, if you're not familiar with this idea of internal family systems, to suspend disbelief, if you will. If you feel very skeptical about things I'm saying, try to let it go in a mindful way and open your mind to this approach from the point of view of seeing if it might be helpful, if you can imagine that it could be helpful for you. So internal family systems is a model of the mind or the psyche, and it's also an approach to psychotherapy, but it's used in other kinds of settings besides psychotherapy. So in mediation, counseling, medical decision-making, elementary education, and dealing with all kinds of everyday life situations in which you're trying to manage yourself and trying to manage others. It was developed and introduced in about 1982 by a family therapist named Richard Schwartz. And internal family systems has been now for at least 15 years, probably more like 20 years, the fastest growing approach to psychotherapy. And it's getting increasingly more attention in our world, but still not enough. And I think we can all benefit from having a sense of internal family systems. So it's different from, it takes a different perspective on an individual from the perspective we use in ordinary life and in our conflict resolution work. Most of the time we're talking about conflict between individual human beings or groups of human beings. And so I call this external conflict. And when we're doing this kind of our ordinary work, we're looking at questions about what does this individual person want or need, or what does this person do? Did that person do? What do they believe? As if it's a single entity, as if the person is a single entity. We also do that in law and in ordinary life. So IFS looks deeper at what's going on within a person. And I call what's going on within us is internal conflict, partly. Part of what's going on is we know there's often in conflict within us. IFS gives us a way to understand the dynamics and have access to the dynamics and change the dynamics, and also to understand, to some extent, other people with whom we are dealing. Okay, I want to be more specific now. There are two kinds of entities in the internal family systems approach. The first is to say, but before I give you the two entities, this approach is based on a method of psychotherapy, or a model of the mind in psychotherapy. No, excuse me, back up again. A model, there's a form of psychotherapy called family systems therapy. And what it means in that situation is, if you're the psychotherapist and you have an individual client, when you try to help that client, you have to understand the entire family, literally family, in which that person is a part. Because so much of what we do in life, in ordinary life, in connection with our actual human families, is based on the behaviors of others. And there's all kinds of important interaction. So he took that approach, that model, that concept of family systems, and applied it to the internal dynamics, psychological dynamics of a human being. And so the internal family he's talking about is not your human family. It's components of your own psyche. So there are two kinds of entities. One entity is called a part or subpersonality. There are many of these. I'll explain it. I'll explain them. The best definition I've seen is from psychologist John Rowan, who defines parts as semi-autonomous regions of the personality capable of acting as a person. Semi-autonomous regions of the personality capable of acting as a person. So parts are like little people within us, and they have many of the qualities of actual people. So parts have an age. They often have an appearance. When we get to know our parts, they have a certain look to us. They have particular beliefs, goals. They have emotions. They have heuristics. They have biases. They have perspectives, just as as human beings seem to have. They can sometimes control our perspectives and behavior. And I'll say more about that later. They're all trying to help us. My parts are trying to help me. Your parts are trying to help you. These occur naturally. All people have these parts. They don't all notice them or think that they have them. But they're all partial in two senses. One, they want to help us. So my parts care more about me than they care about Jeff, and Jeff's parts care about Jeff more than they care about me. But they're partial in another sense, which is that they're not up to date. They don't know much. They're like kids. I mean, they're like much younger people, including children. They're like my parts are like I was when I was much younger, when I was 7 years old or 9 years old or something like that. So they form naturally. So while they're trying to help us, they can be dangerous because they don't know what they're doing. And they may push us to extreme or unreasonable kinds of behaviors. Now, I'm greatly oversimplifying this, okay? But I'm giving you enough that we can get through the rest of my talk. And there are more details in the book. So the parts have these particular goals. Each part.
Excuse me, Len,
yeah.
do you want to show that clip?
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Jeff. Jeff is going to show a clip from a movie with which many of you are familiar, which illustrates something like parts. And it's very funny. And many of you have seen this already. So this is 2.5 minutes. And thank you for reminding me.
You're
Jeff.
welcome. Okay, here goes.
Called Inside Out.
How was the first day of school? Fine, I guess. Did you guys pick up on that? Sure did. Something's wrong. Signal the husband.
Uh-oh, she's looking at us. What did she say? Oh, sorry, sir. No one was listening. Is it garbage night? We left the toilet seat up. What is it, woman? What?
I'm joy. This is sadness. That's anger. This is disgust. And that's fear. We're Riley's emotions. These are Riley's memories. They're mostly happy, you'll notice, not to brag. Miranda may be cold one. What happened? Sadness?
She did something to the memory.
Is everything okay? I don't know.
Take it back, Joey.
Great, Joy. No, please.
Can I say that curse word now?
What do we do now?
Nothing working. Why isn't it working?
We have a major problem.
Oh, I wish Joy was here.
We can fix this. We just have to get back to headquarters.
That's long-term memory. You could get lost in there.
Think positive.
Okay, I'm positive you will get lost in there.
What's that?
Was it there?
There are no bears in San Francisco.
I saw a really hairy guy. He looked like a bear.
This place is huge. Imagination land? No what? Dream Productions? Rainbow Unicorns, right there. I loved you in Fairy Dream Adventure Part 7. Okay, bye. I love you. We can't focus on what's going wrong. There's only a way to turn things around. Oh, great.
Congratulations, San Francisco. You ruined pizza.
Okay. Yeah, we could. Oh, okay. Yeah, let it run a minute. So I think we could, yeah, we can stop it now, Jeff. Okay, thanks, Jeff. So this gives you some sense of what parts are like. Many times parts are best known or identified with a particular emotion or a particular goal. So some of our parts tend to be angry. Some of our parts are concerned about different aspects of our lives. So some parts are concerned with maintaining our reputation as to various qualities, your image as a lawyer, your reputation as a strong person, an honest person, a frightening person. Some focus more on your achievements, or on health and safety, or your finances. And they often travel in polar opposites. So most of us have a generous part and a stingy part, a brave part and a fearful part, and so forth. And if you get into IFS, you can figure this stuff out. It's not very hard to figure this out. And okay, so that's the parts. And sometimes the parts take over and run the bus, drive the bus. But in IFS, the goal is not to have the parts make the decisions, but for the self to do that. And so the self is a special meaning in IFS, which, to be brief, is something like, or very much like, the idea of the soul in some religions. So a self is not a part. It doesn't include parts. Instead, it is what should be the leader and controller of all the parts. And that's the goal of internal family systems therapy, to have the self in control, because the self is all wise, kind, compassionate, clear, curious, everything good, everything we would want in a, or find in a really, really good leader in ordinary life. So we don't always get to self-leadership, and there can be moments of it. Theoretically, the self can control the whole internal system and therefore what we do. But sometimes the parts don't trust the self to do what's best for the person. And so sometimes the parts will take over. And in the episode in Luxor, my parts took over. So here's what I want to say. There were 4 parts that were potentially available to me, or who were potentially interested in what was going on, or came into my mind. Now, give me a little leeway here, because I dreamed this up about 20 years after the events, so I might not be completely accurate. I think this still will be useful in illustrating how IFS works and how what might have happened. So often we give parts names. So I have one part called Gandhi, after Mohandas Gandhi. So this is almost like a self. It's very kind, thoughtful, and so forth. I have another part called Mr. Stingy, who is worried about my financial situation, wants me to save money. I have another part I call Big Shot, who thinks I'm really important, wise, know all about negotiation and mediation, and know how to handle myself, and wants recognition for it, thinks I need recognition for it. I have another part called Good Dad, which was very interested here in teaching my son, Andrew, how to negotiate, not using interest, but using positions, and being adversarial, but in a nice way. So I want to, so let me explain what happened then. So you'll recall, I'm sitting on the carriage bench talking to Mr. Hassan, trying to establish the price. And he says he wants 30 pounds. And I say 10 pounds. And I hear something inside my head, which is from Gandhi saying, well, just give this poor guy the money. He needs it so much. He's got a big family, just give him the money. And immediately Big Shot says, shut up, really loud, to Gandhi. And that's the last I hear from Gandhi. So Gandhi has become what's called an exile. Gandhi's out of the power structure, out of the consciousness structure for a short time anyway. Mr. Stingy also chimes in and he says, pay him only 10 pounds. You're not made of money. You're going to need this money. You know, you're spending a fortune on this vacation. You didn't really need a driver in Cairo anyway. You can't afford to do this. Don't do it. Then Big Shot adds, Mr. Hassan, this driver doesn't know who you are. You're an expert on negotiation. You're a sophisticated man of the world. You're admired and respected by many people. He shouldn't treat you like this. Then Good Dad is telling me to teach Andrew how to negotiate. So what happens is Mr. Stingy and Big Shot and Good Dad they take over my consciousness. they form what I call the coalition of the small-minded. They carry out a coup d'etat. They put the self under house arrest. They put it into a small corner of consciousness so it doesn't have any power. It then interprets the situation that I'm in, and it directs my behavior. So this might sound very far-fetched. The truth is, in my experience, you can actually talk to your parts and understand what parts are doing once you get to know or get some sense of your actual parts. You can talk to them and they'll respond, believe it or not, they will respond as if they're people. So, you know, some people will ask about IFS, are parts real? And Richard Schwartz, who developed this system based on clients he worked with in family therapy, believes they're real. But many others don't actually take a position on whether they're real or not. But most people who work with internal family systems would say that if you treat this phenomena, if you treat the parts as if they were real, as if they were people, they'll respond in that way. And it's not, as I keep repeating, it's not really very hard to get in touch with your parts. I've been teaching IFS to law students, lawyers, mediators, and others in connection with negotiation or mediation since 2012. So there have been, I don't know, a few hundred people. And generally speaking, virtually everyone gets this and is able to identify some of their parts right away using a certain exercise, which is in the book. So one other insight that I think is my biggest insight from studying this case, which is that my interest in this case, my interests and my positions and my core concerns, so that's the idea of core concerns are emotional concerns presented in Beyond Reason by Roger Fisher and Dan Shapiro. There are things like our needs for our concerns about affiliation, autonomy, appreciation, status, and role. All of us have those concerns to some degree, and if they're not satisfied, we'll be unhappy about it. What I see is when I look back at this case that my interests, my positions, my core concerns were not really mine. They were the interests, positions, and core concerns of the coalition of the small-minded. And if that makes sense to you, then it'll be easy to look back at your own behavior in various situations or your own behavior this afternoon when you're in a mediation or a negotiation or just interacting with people in your office or your family, that there's a space between what our parts want or parts of their dominant at a particular point. There's a difference maybe between that and what your higher self would want. If we can just become aware of that difference and aware that we have parts and that I have parts, Jeff has parts, we all have parts, and that when we behave or when we see someone else behaving in a way that we don't like, it can help a lot if we realize that there's a part of us that doesn't like that. And also this other person has a part, has all kinds of parts, and it's maybe a particular part that's responsible for the behavior in question. And so if somebody does something you think is stinky, awful, horrible, IFS helps you avoid thinking of that person as a bad person because they did such and such, but instead be aware that they had a particular part that was trying to help that person, a part that was not up to date, a part that was not wise, but a part that took over at a particular time. And so it's harder to dislike the person or to condemn the person in your mind as bad when you understand this idea that parts can take over and parts frequently run the show. So this can be really helpful, it seems to me, to us in our professional roles. Say, for example, as a mediator, or a negotiator, or in all kinds of lawyering activities, it can help us prepare for an event, prepare for a negotiation or a mediation. There's a lot of stuff in the book about how to do that. It can help us understand the situation better, understand ourselves, understand the other people, and give us ways to manage ourselves and manage the other people that we might not, that we don't otherwise have sometimes. So that's my story. I hope somebody has questions or comments. We have time. We have some time. Yeah.
We do, Lem. Let me start off by saying, let's start with you, your own self, your own individual person. If you just get a sense, oh my gosh, I'm just off on the wrong track here, I'm not behaving properly in this situation, what do you do to kind of get hold of yourself and put the self back in charge of the part, or get a more constructive part in the driver's seat?
So when I'm alert enough and wise enough to notice, what I'll try to do is pause, try to remove myself in some way, even if briefly, from the immediacy of the situation. I will take some deep breaths. There's actually a particular breathing exercise I will use, which is called, some of you will definitely know this, called the 4-7-8 breathing, which calms me down very quickly. And then I'll try to mentally back away and observe the situation. So what I'm trying to do in my mind is getting closer to being in self and observing what's happening. To the extent I can do that, I can become more calm and I can make decisions about what I should do in order to get out of the state of mind I'm in. For example, let's say I'm in a negotiation and I'm treating the other person in a very domineering and not thoughtful way. To back away from that and notice, well, it's this particular part. So I'm giving this person grief because I don't like this person. Don't like this person because this person is too big and too aggressive. I have one part that's scared of this person. I've always been scared of big, tall, strong, aggressive guys. Don't tell anybody. That's private information. And if I can realize that, I will let it go. Or I can talk to the part. There's a lot to this. One of the things you actually can do is talk to the part the way you would another person. So let's say you're in work for an organization and you have a team that works together on sales of a certain kind of product, and you have a meeting coming up, an important meeting coming up with a potential customer. There are some parts in real life, there will be some of your colleagues, some, or at least one colleague you don't want to bring to that meeting because they will, you think they will really ruin the meeting because they're too aggressive, they're impolite, they have terrible judgment or something like that. And what you would do is ask them, in real life, you might not invite them to the meeting or ask them to not come when they thought they would come. And they'll say, I have to come because if I don't come, no one will take care of this or that. Then in real life, if you were a good leader, you'd probably say something like, I don't worry, I know how to take care of that, or so-and-so does, we will take care of it. And we'll talk to you right after the meeting. It's more like, it'd be something like, you can do it very casually too, sometimes. Just like I think in baseball, when there's a fly ball into the outfield and two of the outfielders are moving into the position to catch it, one might say to the other, I've got it. And so then the other, so they won't collide. The other one won't get in the way of the catch. So it's something like that is a simple way to do it. And sometimes if you have time in advance, you can prepare if you know your part. So you're going into, say, what will be a very difficult negotiation or mediation, and you know that, and you want certain parts not to be present because they might. So the part that is scared of tall, strong people, the part that it feels as if you're really not very skillful, a very self-critical part. You might not want to come into when you're having an interview for Supreme Court nomination. You don't want to express a lot of, you don't want to express a lack of self-confidence, or the same would be true for all kinds of, certain kinds of jobs. So you want them not to come. And so let's say you're, one of your relatives wants to come along to help you. And you may want to explain why you can handle it yourself. It'll be better if this person doesn't come, and you understand that they're trying to help you and you appreciate that, and you'll tell them what happened right away and it'll be okay. Something like that, rather than saying, no, I don't want you to come, get out of here, which is better than not doing anything. But the idea is to treat the parts nicely and well, the way you would treat, way we ought to treat other people, generally speaking, right? That's the orientation and goal of the self, to be nice to other people.
So then, Len, could you visualize mediation as kind of the entirety of the mediation as being an entity with the mediator supposed to play the role of the self and the other participants being parts, and it's up to the mediator skillfully to deal with each of the parts to help the organism or the entity of the conflict move in a better direction?
It's a really interesting idea, which I have not thought about. And I'm thinking that our friend David Hoffman would love to answer this question. I don't know whether he's on this webinar. I could definitely conceptualize that. And that is yes, what many mediators would try to do. But it's, it's too simple because the actual mediators, the difference between mediators, a mediator and the self, is the mediators still make mistakes. The self doesn't make mistakes. The self is really clear. The self is kind and curious, and mediators are, unfortunately, they have their own parts systems. And so mediators face the same sorts of challenges that parties do in a mediation. But mediators who are working with IFS, my sense is, will be inclined to try to inculcate in the parties the kind of behavior that self would want a person to carry out, being nice to the other people. As a simple example, the problem is that in a mediation, so if there are two parties and one mediator, in reality, what you're dealing with is all of their prominent parts. So there's a whole lot going on. And in some ways, you can think of, in a conflict, the parties are, in some sense, behaving and interacting with, the parts are interacting with the parts in their own system, but they're also interacting with certain parts in the other person. And they're also interacting with, and the mediator is also interacting with parts in both people. What we're trying to do, maybe this is another way of answering your question and just reframing it a little bit to say that the mediator is trying to deal with or bring out the self in the parties. And I think maybe that's one way to think about your question. And mediators who are oriented by, to, and with IFS would be inclined to try to do that. But it's hard. I mean, that's much harder. But it's a great question. It's a great aspiration and would be an appropriate goal.
Thank you, Len. One last question. What about the interaction of the mind and the body? You know, sometimes we've had too much caffeine or too much, or not enough sleep, or too much sugar, or whatever, things that affect our mood. So how do you view the effect between mood, physicality, and this idea of the self and those parts which come to rise at any moment?
This is a wonderful question. Of course, it reminds me of the worst mediation experience I've ever had, and it was awful partly because I was extremely tired to start it, and I'd been on the phone with the lawyers late the night before. And I had been traveling to get there and out of town. I get up early. I'm really wrecked. And because of that, partly because of that, I had trouble functioning well in two ways. One is I developed an antipathy toward one of the parties and an affection for the other party. And then I started thinking about I wasn't controlling my awareness and attention well. So I can't stand this person. This person's great. I could be best friends with this person. Then I start thinking, do they like me? Do they think I'm a good mediator? Then I start thinking, why do you even do this mediation? This is miserable. You should stay in your office and write footnotes because that's what you get rewarded for in academics. And then I realized, finally, hey, you're not listening to these people. They're talking. You're not listening to them because you're thinking about whether they like you, whether they think you're a good mediator, and so forth. But your job here, you're here to help them. And even if you don't like one of them, you're still here to help them. So come back and pay attention. I was able to rescue that, and it came out okay, but I'm quite ashamed of my own behavior, and yet I'm telling everybody about it. Because I think the largest part of the explanation of that kind of behavior was that I was exhausted. And the mediation started, sort of early in the morning, and I should have, in retrospect, somehow delayed it for an hour or two. So there are all kinds of things that are influencing us that are smaller and can be relevant. So sometimes too much caffeine, for example, with too much chocolate for some of us. And it's hard to, so the factors I've isolated, so those would be in a way deeper than the kind of factors I've illustrated. So it might be that being tired keeps you from, or kept me from being so self-centered. So I was so self-centered. I was so tired I couldn't notice that I wasn't thinking right. I was so self-centered that I didn't really care so much about the parties as whether they for a while, whether they liked me, whether they thought I was a good mediator, whether I was a good mediator. What about all the people who assume I'm a good mediator because I wrote these articles about mediation? And I'm a phony. So there's all of this going on. And part of it's going on because I realize that I'm just because I'm tired. I'm feeling so there's part of me that feels sorry for myself. You should walk out, go back to your office and rest. Write another article. This is too rough for you, not worth it. So I think if I don't know if that's enough of an answer for your question. Yes. There's a lot of causes of the various obstacles that I've listed. And this isn't especially scientific. It's a little bit scientific, this list. But there's always, if you think about causation, not only in law, but in anything, there's always something deeper and earlier in this chain of causation.
Thank you, Len. This is a fabulous conversation and an incredible suite of subjects, and we could carry this on for a very long time. I hope that people are moved to contribute to the Chicago Food Depository. We've put the link again in the chat. It's www.chicagosfoodbank.org. That's www.chicagosfoodbank.org. Len Riskin, this has been a tremendous presentation. We hope that people go online or into a bookstore if they have one in their neighborhood and pick up a copy of your new book, Man in Conflict Mindfully. I've read it and thought it was terrific and recommend it very highly to everybody. We'll be back next week with another excellent presentation. And for today, we thank you all, and we are complete.
Thank you.